All right. I call to order the July 25th Planning Commission meeting, regular meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chair DeBolt, absent. Vice Chair Riley.
Here.
Commissioner Andreed.
Here.
Commissioner Quilty.
Here.
Commissioner Gross.
Here.
Commissioner Lowe. Commissioner Stoffel-Kanik.
Here. Thank you. Would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this point, I'll move on to oral communications. If there's anyone here that would like to come up and speak on an item that is not on the agenda, please come forward and do so. Please state your name. Is there a sign-in up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, sign in, state your name.
Okay, my name is Debbie Sendejas. I'm here again, and I'm a property owner here. And I put a letter there that is from myself, also from my cousin. And it's in regards to the parking, the new parking ordinance that you have made here in the city, in regards to if you do any improvements to your property, if you add a room, or if you decide you want to put apartments. And I feel that it is in excess and just kind of extreme in the sense of what the requirements are for parking for, say, for instance, if it's a home adding a room, or if it is an apartment building that is for every room, I have to have something quoted back, I have it here, what your requirements are as far as for every bedroom, or so to speak, a room, and what your requirements are per parking. It just seems so extreme. So I'm voicing my concerns again and coming up and speaking on that term again. And this pen's not working.
Let me get her a working pen. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is it?
Hi, I'm Carl Wilfond, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my wife, Arlene Chavez, and her family. Arlene was born on Walnut Street. Her family's lived on Walnut Street since 1909. Continuously, somebody on her family's been on Walnut Street since 1909. We wanted to add a bedroom to her family's home, her mom and dad's home, the home she was raised in. And my architect tells me I need 6 parking spaces because we want to add one more bedroom and a bathroom to a family home. Because we live on Walnut Street and because everybody sells their homes and they build apartments. We're not selling our home. We want to live in Los Alamitos, continue living here, continue living on Walnut Street. But we can't have 6 parking spots on our property. A 2-car garage and 4 parking spots. We don't need them. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak on any issue that's not on the agenda?
Chairman, if I can, I'd just like to add that, as you know, we're in the process of updating the city's zoning code. And there's a technical advisory committee that has been formed to provide input into that update process. On August 13 at 5 p.m., we'll be conducting the 5th TAC meeting, Technical Advisory Committee meeting. And at that meeting, we're going to be talking about single-family and multifamily development standards, and we will be revisiting parking at that meeting. So that is August 13th at 5 p.m. There's a Technical Advisory Committee meeting. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. All right, is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak on anything? All right, seeing no one else come forward, we will move on to approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain. I wasn't at the last meeting. Motion carried.
So,
Quorum, correct?
We don't
Is
have a
that-
quorum.
Is that,
Well, that was
we have
3.
quorum. It's 3 of 5.
Oh, that's.
3 of 5 that are present.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so motion carries.
Okay, so I'm thinking about those who didn't show.
Yeah. Post them.
Yeah. So we'll move on to discussion. We have nothing under discussion, nothing under consent calendar, so we'll move on to public hearings. The first item 8A, the zoning ordinance amendment 18-04, updating regulations for accessory dwelling units to continue to comply with state legislation. Do I have a staff report?
Vice Chair Riley, this is, and members of the Planning Commission, this is a zoning ordinance amendment 1804. We did a resolution of intention about ADUs and the updates the state would like us to do. And tonight we've presented the updates in a staff report and in the resolution. And if you have any questions, Kendra is the one that found the changes that need to be made in our particular zoning code surrounding ADUs. Those are accessory dwelling units. So I guess would be a good time to open the public hearing.
Yeah, I think before we do that, do we have any questions for staff? Or
We just asked for a correction so far on the date. We're not 201, we're 2000 something. I don't know which year it was.
on,
On the, it's attachment 2 on page 1. Whereas on October 8th, 2001, or 201.
I think it's 2017.
okay. Anything else for staff? Oh, and can we make a note that Gary Lowe has arrived? Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and speak on this item? Not. Okay, so with that, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. I actually had a couple questions on this because part of the resolution, section 2A, there's language in there that says the proposed amendments ensure and maintain consistency between the general plan and the zoning code and state law. So I don't know that as our general plan and zoning code currently stand, that we can make that assertion.
So I think that it does because state law requires this change. It's not something that the city unfortunately has much leeway to control. So it ensures that the zoning code now is consistent with state law as required. But I know Andy and I discussed if you'd like to have a slight modification to that language to say that something to reference state law more so than that. Like at the beginning saying, per the findings of the California legislature, something to that effect.
Just something that, because right now, it's not consistent with our general plan or our zoning code. Right,
Right,
as
so we're-
as those two items currently stand. So I
Right.
understand the state is the overriding factor. We just need to clarify the language on that.
Okay,
I
right,
think.
which is why yes, exactly why we're doing the amendment.
Yeah, that's right.
Is it a chicken or the egg kind of argument? Like,
I mean, I think, well, I'm not sure if I understand the intent of the modification. So it's either we're making this amendment to maintain consistency because it's required by state law, which is true. And then I'm not sure, though, if instead you wanted to say that the finding is required by state law.
Chair DeBolt had
It's-
suggested that we include the word deemed to be consistent. because we're kind of being
Because we're being
forced
forced.
by the state of California.
Yeah, so the
So-
state's saying that we have to do it.
Right, but this line doesn't say that we're in compli, it doesn't say right now, it says that we're going to ensure
Yes.
that we are.
Yes.
You know, it's not saying that right now we're in compliance or with it.
Okay. Do you think we're okay?
I think we're
Like it's
okay
a-
on that.
But I think we can include something that just says we are doing this pursuant, make it a little bit clearer, we're doing it pursuant to state mandate, and per the state mandate, we're deeming that it's consistent with our plans, our general plan and our zoning code, but because we're being forced to by the state.
Because
That
is
makes
this
sense.
going to go to city council and come back to us?
No, it'll go to city council and it'll become law at that point,
Okay.
if adopted.
I think
Right.
then Part B, just below that, may be where at least Chair DeBolt.
Well, I had a
One-
question about
oh,
Part B.
okay, go ahead.
Also, that was my
Go ahead.
second question, because the first sentence in there says, "The proposed amendment will not adversely affect the public convenience, health, interest, safety, or welfare of the city."
So
So,
I think that might be the more appropriate place to say that the proposed amendment is required by state law, and the California legislature has determined that it will not adversely affect these things. Because the first one, I think, is more a statement that you're taking action to clean up any discrepancy between the requirements and what
Right.
it currently is. This one, I think, if it's something that the planning commission is doing purely to comply with state requirements, and that's not, it's not initiated by other facts that would support that finding, then I think that that would be the appropriate place to include that language saying that it's required by state law and that they have already made that finding.
right, and I guess my point is that, like, that this section B, you know, I think there are people up here that would argue that maybe we don't think it's in the best interest or welfare of the city, right? So, but if the state's saying you have to do it anyways, well, let's be clear on that.
Okay, so with that, the proposed amendment and then insert required by state law, and the California legislature has deemed that it will, or determined or deemed that it will not, and then the remainder of the paragraph. So insert.
Sure, where
Okay.
the state's the one that has decided that, and it's
Yeah.
not,
Yes.
we don't really get to do that. So is that gonna mean a kind of a rewrite of this, and then it comes back next time, or we can just,
No, I think, I think that's fine. I mean, the whereases detail the Senate bill and the Assembly bill, and I think it's such a minor change that it's fine to proceed with that, because
so we could
You can
it
approve with
based on-
changes.
Okay, that's fine. Those are the kind of two things I wanted to address. Does anybody else have anything they would like to?
I didn't have anything. It's pretty straightforward. Is what it is.
What it is.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Did we open to the public?
Yeah, we did earlier.
We didn't know, nobody
Okay,
spoke.
good.
Yeah.
Open and
All
close.
right.
I'll second it.
I have a
I'll make
motion.
a motion to approve Amendment 18-04 with the changes discussed.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. And we will move on to item 8B, consideration of zoning amendment, a small wireless cellular installation within the city of Los Alamitos. Staff report.
Okay. Vice Chair Riley and Planning Commissioners, this is talking about the small wireless installations that we mentioned last night. Last week. Last month. Whenever.
We've been talking about it all along.
We've been talking about it forever. So anyway, we basically have a line of people that are waiting for us to come up with something. Otherwise, the way it stands right now, we have to do a separate application for each one of these installations, and they're talking hundreds. They're not talking one or two in the city. So if we don't change the code soon, we will be doing one at a time as we go through them, and it will take us forever. But one of the questions tonight is, do we want to do it as groups of them, or do we want to do it separately and so forth? And Kendra has written some questions for us to go through tonight, if you'd like to follow that along.
And just to add to that, Tom, I think also with some general feedback based on the questions here, it may also be helpful then for me to bring back something, and then you can further modify that, so then you would at least see what a new ordinance would look like.
Right. And then also, we need to know whether you feel like it would be appropriate for us to lease these spaces or, and charge for them a fee, or whether it's just a utility everyone wants, and that's and just accept them as they are, or whatever it is you give us some feedback on. So, yeah, back to you and the questions. So.
All right, questions for staff? Tom, can you clarify, you're saying like hundreds of installations?
Yeah, it could be, right now, I would say there are people with 15 different ones that want to submit like now, like yesterday, and I keep telling them, we're working on the code and trying to figure it out, because otherwise you've got to give us 15 applications at this time. So they're willing to wait until you guys make some other decision about that, or keep it the same way it is.
Well, the good news is after 4 or 5, you'll probably start getting used to getting it done.
Yeah.
They'll go faster.
They'll write themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If staff can direct the planning commission to page 405 of the staff report, there's a list of questions, and if we can maybe just kind of walk through those questions, get some input from the commission, that would be great. I think, kind of begin discussion, should we consider these at all? If not, that kind of answers the rest of the
Yeah, and if you
staff
think they're
report.
not
Yeah,
safe,
right.
or something like that, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the science?
Well, we're somewhat limited in that the federal government has determined that they are safe, and so if we want to prohibit them for some reason, it can't be on the basis of safety on its own. So, I think for purposes of the discussion, we should accept that they are safe, and then deal with more of the aesthetics, the application process, the whatever standards you'd like to see with it. Whatever standards you'd like to see. And then also, like Tom mentioned, the lease or license, if it's on city property. And then also places where you don't think they belong.
I can tell you that the research that I did between the CDC, the FDA, and just the generic research through a couple of the sites that I have, I found nothing that indicates we can prove any negative effects from this.
We cannot, Ian? No.
There's no way to prove that the wireless installations will cause any harm to to people. There's nothing.
Well, I think you sent something in the supplemental information about that, right? Saying that we can't consider it anyhow, so.
We can't, but there's nothing out there data-wise that I can find on it to say that it's going to cause harm to somebody.
Okay, any other questions for staff at this time? I'm going to open up the public hearing. Is
You
there?
want to do the next question?
Oh.
We should probably
You wanna-
go through them.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
go to the public hearing and then
Yes.
bring it back to the commission for further input.
Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing. If anyone here would like to come forward and speak on this item, please do so. Okay, seeing no one come forward, I will close the public
Well,
hearing.
before we close the public hearing, just want to add that we did receive a letter from attorney representing McKinsey and Paul Britton regarding this matter, and just enter that in the record.
Right.
Yeah,
Has everyone,
has been given a copy.
everyone got a copy of that letter? Okay. Okay, so with that, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion. So do we just want to go down these questions one at a time? And
I think that probably
I
the
think
best way.
okay, so the first question is, should these small wireless cellular installations be permitted in the city?
And once again, that's kind of how they look. These are basically the electrical poles of the future.
Is that,
Is that,
I mean, you probably don't know, but as, that one as an example, is that one carrier's equipment, or is that a?
They can share it, or they can do, well, depending on what you guys decide. They could be two people sharing it, I mean, two companies sharing it, or they could do separate ones on the pole so they don't.
Do we have multiple
Interact.
carriers in that example?
That
right
one's
there?
a single carrier right there. That's
So
the,
take all of that equipment for one.
yes.
All of that
Yeah,
is
this
one?
one, though, is extraordinary because it has not only the antenna array, which is a straight up and down thing at the top, it has RRUs, which are the ones on the side that are shorter, and then it also has the utility box for it a little down below there. Let's see here. Yeah.
Because
these are-
examples in the
And
package
this would be
Yeah. these
either
ones
up
look much
here
nicer.
or on the ground, like utility boxes you
box,
see,
yeah.
or in a vault below ground. So, but in this case, they put it up here, which is,
That's
you know,
And
Yeah.
that could be the kind of input we're seeking from the planning commission, is that no, maybe more along these lines.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
that's pretty obtrusive.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if the equipment's going to be put underground, or what do you say the other options were?
Yeah, on the pole or on the ground, on the sidewalk, you know, like light, yeah, the
It's
boxes.
right,
you
it's
see.
a vault.
Utility box,
It's a
yeah.
vault.
Right.
They're smaller than the electrical vaults, but a vault like that, but a smaller version.
Which would be next to the.
Typically, you don't see these real often. That's a type that you don't see very often, more likely to see the kind that are in the packet.
And that's for now, because
Right.
once multiple carriers
Right.
want to put
One-
separate ones.
One issue that we present for consideration by the planning commission is whether or not to replace a pole, because when you're using an existing utility pole, they're often wood or they're solid concrete, and you'd have to run cabling on the outside. Oftentimes, the carriers will come in at the direction or at the requirement of the city and replace a pole. We have a hollow pole, and all the cabling and conduit is running on the inside. It looks a lot more aesthetically pleasing. The equipment can either be underground, where you don't even realize there's any equipment there. It could be vaulted, or it can be kind of like what you're seeing in the slide behind me. So that's the input and direction we're seeking from the commission.
Yeah.
Well, we don't currently have any underground infrastructure like that.
No, we just have the large wireless installations, and they have a little fence around them with all of those units behind the fence.
Right, but if we were to say, hey, this has to go underground, that'd be a project.
The part that would go underground
Right?
is
You'd have to
just
excavate, you'd have
this.
to-
Yeah, they'd have to excavate and create an underground vault, but
Right.
that's
That's on them.
That's on them, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The RRUs may not be on every installation, but these have to be up in the air. Those are the antennas.
Yeah.
And that looks like what we have pictures of here in the packet more, is
Right.
the antenna part?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The things that then start concerning me when we talk about poles are not just the wood versus the metal, the location, are they in commercial, residential, are they the decorative that we have, non-decorative, and what's the impact if we allow them in residentials to the residents there? And if there's an accident that takes the pole down, what does that affect for the residents that use that cellular?
Right, that's again the direction we're seeking from the commission tonight. Is commission open to seeing them anywhere in the city? Is it on our arterials only? Commercial, industrial arterials? Replacement, should there be an accident exactly? How quickly are we going to require that they come back and repair that? I'd imagine they'd want it done quickly because now their antenna's out of service. So I think that would be done quickly, but it's something we'd probably want to put in code. So let's try and take these questions,
Well,
in
but-
sequence, and maybe we can get,
Real quick, with that being said, the pole would actually still need to go up by the power company. The antenna could be addressed at a later date, right? I mean, if it's a lot of our streetlights are carrying power lines.
Right.
Like, because of how old they are. So you have a streetlight and you have a power line. So that would be, the electric company actually getting that back up and not having to wait necessarily for the cell to come
Right,
to do the
right,
antenna,
right,
correct?
right.
Okay.
Okay, so should the that first question, should these small wireless cellular installations be permitted in the city? That's kind of a broad question, so I think
Yes,
it's
yes.
a maybe.
On arterials only, yes. Yes, but not in residential, yes, anywhere in the city. What's the thought of the commission?
I wouldn't want it in a residential area, bottom line. It's going to impact the residents, and that's where a problem comes in. Commercial, or I prefer just the main streets than that.
Major arterials?
In the discussion section, they talk about the city's regulations cannot unreasonably discriminate between wireless service providers, and has something in here, or prohibit a wireless company from filling a gap in service. So if we allow this, and there's a gap in service, and the only way to fill it is by putting it in a residential area, does that language mean that we don't have a choice?
I think it means that.
So I don't know. I don't think that means that in this particular city. I think that might be a problem that you'd have if you were a more rural community. But here, I think in this, I wouldn't know 100%, but I think that you would be hard pressed to find an area that a carrier could say they don't have any service within the city.
Yeah, I guess, because
Right.
I don't know anything about the technology. I don't know what the range on these things are and what kind of density we would potentially be looking at.
Well, and Tom, I think, and Andy, most of these, they either have the larger facilities that would be the primary, and then these
Right.
kind of helps spread the service around. So it's likely that they are already reaching everywhere, and it just, to them, it helps them improve the product they're providing. So I doubt the gap would be an issue in Los Alamitos.
And the other thing about Los Alamitos is we're relatively flat. We don't have to deal with the topography that a lot of other communities may have to do. We've got hills, and that's one of the biggest barriers to service, is where you've got the topography that would block service.
In some instances, they may remove the larger, more costly setups in place more of the smaller that are, I think, maybe less expensive to operate and own.
But if they already have them installed,
Sometimes the stuff gets outdated, the technology gets in order to improve those, it's probably less expensive to just put in a new one and just not upgrade that facility. It just depends.
It can also help with speed, and everybody wants to have, be able to provide their customers the fastest speed out there.
right.
Technology.
Nobody wants the little buffer wheel. You guys were saying major arterial ways. I'm almost thinking it might be better for non-major arterial ways. And that way, it's kind of out of sight, off of side streets, out of the main area from a viewing standpoint. I don't know, if you look at some of the other zoning areas, commercial, industrial type areas, industrial zoning type areas where you get them off the main street, maybe, I don't know.
I like that idea, but
Might
like
be
if you,
difficult to map it, but I'm just thinking, now you have them off of they're not on Los Alamitos Boulevard and Catella.
right.
and everything.
But if you look at like Carrier Row, where could you put it that wouldn't be in residential that's not on Catella? You know,
Right.
there's no,
But maybe then it gets limited to certain areas of the city, though, that's what I'm saying. Maybe it isn't just a broad stroke where it goes in the whole city. This
Yeah.
is the area they have to work with.
So,
As an example.
and that's kind of an aesthetics.
It's more of an aesthetics. I mean, I
Aesthetically driven,
don't
right?
necessarily mind the photos that are in here from an aesthetic standpoint.
Right.
Really not the end of the world to see this one on top of the pole, or I don't really necessarily care for them in the middle of the pole down low like that, but that's not horrible because they still are pretty small. But that's maybe one carrier.
yeah, that
So-
one's bad.
So that's bad. But even this situation could go from okay to really bad if you have all the carriers that decide they want to play on the same pole. And so now you have 3 or 4 carriers on one pole with all separate equipment running down the length of the pole. I don't know.
And do we know, like, is it going to be multiple carriers? Because I thought a lot of them share towers now.
Well, that's,
And,
I was gonna say, that kind of goes to the next bullet. By what process should they be permitted? If you have separate carriers having to come before the planning commission and identifying the poles they want to go on, that is where the opportunity where you can say, that's not gonna work. Try and find another pole nearby. So, second bullet, again, for discussion, should this be done administratively? Do you want it to come before the planning commission through a CP process? Do you want to have it come before the planning commission through some other type of process, some wireless antenna process, but still requiring planning commission review? But I think by having some review process, that would eliminate the issues where you'd have multiple carriers all trying to glom onto the same pole.
So what you're saying is that since we're making the rules, essentially, we can basically stipulate, hey, one carrier per pole.
You can
Whoever
do that.
gets that pole first
can do
is
that.
the winner.
Yeah. Unless somebody else can come in and show that they'll be stealth, they're not going to impact the aesthetics of that.
Or they can
that way.
share the housing, you know, they can both fit their stuff in the
Technology is
same
changing so
housing.
fast that they might be able to show something where it's not going to be that, but you're going to get something where you're not going to even realize there's two carriers on the pole.
Right.
But again, we can write that into a process procedure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, do we want to think about possibly treating this in the way we treat our sign ordinance, in the sense that we give them a maximum square inches, square foot of opportunity that their apparatus that they can have up there? In other words, you can only have certain, maybe a couple square feet or a couple, how many square inches, I don't know, we can figure that out, so they don't start coming in with larger equipment, more obtrusive equipment, multiple antennas, say this is the X amount of size you can have up there, and you cannot exceed that.
Commission could say antennas cannot exceed, I'm going to throw a number out there, 4 feet above an existing pole. You cannot have equipment lower than 10 feet off the ground. I mean, there are standards the commission can put in place, and carriers would have to follow that if they want to locate on a pole in Los Alamitos.
Okay, that being said, it sounds like, I mean, there are a lot of ways that you could go with this. It could get pretty detailed in order for us to come up with something that becomes sound, that doesn't have a lot of holes that they can prey on. What about the possibility of bringing maybe some ordinances that are already out there from other cities that have already adopted it, and maybe, in a sense, cities that have ones that do aesthetically look, you know, they've done a good job. When you go through the city, you go, you know what, that's not obnoxious, that looks okay.
You want the ones where you drive so you don't realize it's there.
Exactly.
Right, I mean, essentially, I think that's what we all
Right.
want if we're
Right.
gonna do this, but I'm wondering if instead of reinventing the wheel, maybe we could take a look at some other,
I'm
Well,
totally
let
in
me
favor
go
of
back to
that.
the questions, and if we can get some feedback, we could start framing a resolution, or an ordinance for adoption. We can come back with samples from other communities, that we can come back with photos that, if we have an example from city X, and we can go to that city X and take a couple pictures of some existing installations. Do we like that? Is that working? Is it not working? So let's just get some feedback, and we can start putting together a skeleton of a resolution, and then we can fill it in with examples of both photos and ordinances from other cities.
okay?
And, I mean, I think moving down the list, the question about should they pay a license or a lease fee is an important one to help us know what you're looking for as far as a model.
Do they pay a fee to the company to use their pole?
Oftentimes they're split, the revenues are split between the whoever owns a pole and the city that is the leasing.
So we
the pole.
should be
Right.
getting money,
Right, shared revenues.
because we want to make sure we're getting shared revenue.
I don't have it, but I think the last packet did have a list of some examples. of
The supplemental
per-
that we got emailed to us did.
Permit fees.
Yeah.
And some different things, yeah.
Yeah, that was what we emailed to you, yeah. Yeah.
So we're all in favor, we should be getting paid.
Charging
Yeah.
something.
Uh-huh, Yes.
Like an annual lease fee or,
Yep.
So the next question, what insurance requirements, wouldn't we want them to have insurance whether we're charging or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's something too, that we can take the city's standard insurance requirements and input that into the ordinance, and then if there, for some reason, anyone thinks they should be higher for this particular type of project, then we can modify it.
And just to add a little bit of knowledge that I have about the cell site stuff, when you're talking about getting paid, several years ago, I was selling generators to some carriers, and there was a shift in the large cell sites, and they found these compact, larger than those, but compact, and it was less expensive for them, they found, if they didn't put it on the ground, this cell piece of equipment, that if they bolted it to the wall of the building, they could pay the owner of the building a monthly fee, basically like renting space, if you will, and it was way cheaper for them to do that. So they would take this box and mount it on the wall instead of having it on the ground, like a 20-year lease, as an example, or a 30-year lease, just with a monthly lease fee for that square footage, if you will. So definitely, there should be some sort of a lease or something involved in that space.
Mhm. Okay.
And I think the next two bullets are kind of tied together. I think I'm hearing the planning commission is going to want to review these, not a ministerial approval, but bring them before the planning commission so that you have the ability to review the applications as they come before us. And then,
I think so.
Because right now, we just let people put in, I mean, the companies put in light poles without coming to you guys. This will be requiring it to go to you guys when we replace these, is what we're asking, yeah.
When you replace the light poles, or?
Yeah, because they replace the light poles too.
Oh, every
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, when they do this, to put wires down inside. And
Well, that's something we.
do you want it to be a light
require.
pole you like, or do you want to just leave the selection of the light pole up to them?
well, generally, the poles should kind of match what's on the street. You don't want to have one pole.
Yeah,
kind of
we
stick
should
out.
Yeah,
have
so
it.
that's,
a standard
As-
one.
As
that-
close to mirroring what's down the block.
Right.
So it doesn't stick out like, you know.
I
yeah.
definitely want them hollow with the wires running down the
Yeah.
middle, not on the outside.
You don't want them, or you do?
I do.
Do, okay, I
Right.
heard no, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, I mean, my opinion, and others up here can tell me whether they agree or not, is to make these as unobtrusive as possible, to be thoughtful about where we allow them. Like, you know, we just did the improvements on Los Alamitos Boulevard, right, with these newer light posts that are decorative. My preference would be not to have anything going on
On the
these light
medians?
posts, right? Because those are decorative, and my understanding is we may be replacing the light poles at some point in the future,
On
you
the
know, along the
sides.
sides to match those, right? And, you know, versus, I don't think we're going to do that same thing all the way down Catella, right?
It was originally planned to go down to Farquhar. And then
Really?
they cut it back to just from Catilla to Cerritos.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I think that's consistent kind of with what Larry was talking
Yeah,
about, hey, let's have them, let's shift them over into an area adjacent to that where they're not going to be as obtrusive as to some of this decorative stuff that we're doing, where these are going to really detract from it.
Right.
So I think that whole aesthetic thing and making sure that we don't have installations that look like that, where we're going to do it, let's make them as unobtrusive as possible.
Okay.
And like I said, be thoughtful about where we put them.
Should we just say we don't want them on La Salle Boulevard or Catella? Just keep them off of those two main streets? That's really our visibility of the city. You know what I mean? That's really what we're looking at.
Well, you also have Cerritos too, down by the high school and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you could pick it.
I'm kidding.
No, I mean,
I think we need to look at kind of where would we put them, where that would still allow there to be coverage in those areas? Because there might be some areas where that gets a little tricky.
right.
Could be.
So I think there's some analysis that would probably need to be done there, but.
My thought is to keep them off Catella and La Salle Boulevard and residential. They can possibly go anywhere else. That'd be just my thought.
Sure.
There's really not a lot of houses that I know of directly on Cerritos. It's more businesses and then side streets, correct? Or Cypress on the other side. But even then, their houses are off side streets, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Well, let me ask one other question if I can. We're talking about these small cells on public right-of-way. What if somebody came before the commission in a shopping center where they want to replace the light standard in the shopping center and wanted to put one in the shopping center light pole? Is the commission open to that? Let's say, I'm trying to think.
Bonds, shopping
Yeah,
center.
Bonds,
Yeah,
yeah. I'm-
bonds. Would the
I'm
commission
fine
be
That's
with
open?
not,
that.
that's not, I
As
mean,
long as it doesn't look like that.
Right. So the commission is open for either.
yeah, I mean, that becomes more of, back to the industrial type
Okay.
zoning or,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, where it's not
Right.
directly on.
That would be like the perfect spot.
Actually, that would, yeah, I would
Bond
say that.
Shopping Center.
Okay.
that would-
Or
You know.
the Cellular area over in that area.
Okay.
Those are good
Is
areas
there-
for
I don't
it.
even know if it's there.
Hmm.
I can't think of the name of it, but that's okay.
Well, going down to the next bullet, should small cells be prohibited on certain structures or surfaces? I did hear from Chair DeBolt that you probably should have a separation from schools and parks, about a 100-foot separation. Any other thoughts and input on that?
I mean, I'm good with that, but it kind of goes back to what you said, that we have to take in, I mean, can we actually, based on the safety that standard, that, do we have, I mean, is he referring to that because of safety, or is he referring to that
He didn't
because of?
elaborate, but I think as long as you don't say you're prohibiting them, if there's an alternative location that's away from that 100 feet.
Oh, I see, okay, then you
That,
can,
right, I think outright ban saying we don't want them because they're dangerous, that we can't do that.
Yeah,
If-
and then schools, of course, need internet also,
Right.
and fast internet, so.
And
Yeah.
a place like a park, you may be able to base that on aesthetics so that you're not interrupting the view of the park.
mhm.
But otherwise, it has to be based on some standards like aesthetics.
Right.
Could we ask Dr. Crop her opinion about these being near the school, maybe a little bit?
What if the school wanted to put them on their parking lot?
So I might want to ask her what their thoughts are before I ruled them out.
I mean,
Okay.
to
Yeah.
Tom's point,
Yeah, but is this
Like the
internet or is
internet.
it cell? I mean, well.
Could be
yeah,
both.
Internet
It
on
could
your
be.
phone,
Yeah,
but I mean,
probably
typically
both.
it's,
Could be both.
yeah.
Data over.
Data over cell.
Yeah. Okay. Should small cells be prohibited on poles if underground equipment is a feasible alternative? Yeah, if you can put it in the ground, I
But
mean,
underground.
I would think, yeah,
100%.
That'd be preferable.
yes, okay.
I have to assume this is way cheaper for them to do than to put it underground.
Okay, we talked about standards near schools and parks. Should manufacturer spec sheets be used in lieu of noise studies?
Noise studies in what regard? The antenna making noise?
Yeah.
See, generally, they're not,
They're
yeah, they're
not.
not, they don't make noise, yeah.
It's not like the old, no,
Yeah.
No, I mean,
like a radio tower.
yeah.
And we have a decimal thing anyway, so they would have to go by that.
I don't think
Okay.
that's gonna be an issue.
Should the city require the intent to replace an existing streetlight pole, replace pole or existing structure than pole, or structure within the public right-of-way? Again, I think I've heard if it is going to require cabling to be outside, the commission would like to see the pole replaced with a hollow pole and all the cabling equipment.
Right.
Or cabling be run to the inside of the pole. Yep, okay.
And
Should small cells be allowed on a wooden pole? That gets back to the other issue. If it's wooden pole, you're going to have your cabling running on the
Yeah,
outside.
I don't
say
think so.
no.
No? Okay. Should small equipment be located within a below-grade equipment vault or enclosed at the base of the pole or in the pole itself? I think I've heard not on the pole itself, so no on that.
Yeah.
Is the commission open to a vault on grade? We can come back with some photos of a couple of those, so you can kind of see what they look like. They're not the big, large traffic signal vaults, they're not the big Edison vaults, but it is a vault.
Yeah, they're about 3
Yeah,
feet tall,
yeah,
and about this
yeah,
big.
yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be right next to the
Yeah.
pole, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of those end up looking really beat up after a while. I don't know what people do to them, but
That's when you
They
get
end up
artists
looking
to come
bad.
in and do some really cool stuff on.
So, what about we require that they be undergrounded unless they can demonstrate that it's not feasible for whatever reason, and then you can consider an above-grade vault?
And they would have to maintain them aesthetically. If they get vandalized, if they get beat up, they need to deal with it
Graffiti, whatever.
promptly.
Okay.
Or we can do it and send them a bill.
Well, that would be either you do it or we do it. Yeah, something like that.
How long should the review process take? I would say it would be equivalent to any other development. As long as we have a complete package that we can present to the commission that has the appropriate studies, location, any other information we need, it would be in the same clock as we would come before the commission with a site plan review or conditional use permit.
Yeah.
Should there be planned protected areas within the city where installations are not allowed? I've heard Catella, LaSalle Boulevard. Any other ideas, thoughts? Maybe
Residential.
near the hospital?
Yeah.
I think of other sensitive areas.
But
I
you
don't-
can go on the backside of the hospital on Catalina, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You can do Kaler.
Yeah.
We gave them that
Yeah.
street.
And again, maybe the hospital wants to
They may
take part in
want
the
it.
income and use their lights in the parking lot.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew, is there anything else that you think of?
I noticed missing on here was, we need to know whether you can accept multiple application, multiple installations on the same one application or not. Can,
I think what we heard, I know that's not on this list, but I think what we heard earlier is that a preference for one per pole unless otherwise concealed, whether it's shared equipment or some other means.
right,
Right.
but do
But
we
he's saying
charge
about
them
locations.
multiple?
If they're going down Sausalito, I'm just throwing a street out.
Yeah, and they're
And-
putting in 5 or 6 at
Right,
one
and
time.
one
Do we
application,
want
yeah.
one application, or do we
Right.
want 5, 6 different
Oh.
And
applications?
I would think if the commission is open to multiple locations, we might want to do a permit different than a CUP. CUP is usually site-specific, and if you have multiple, but I think we could still write something where it would give the commission the discretion, it would give the opportunity for public input, but still come before the commission without being a conditional use permit, because again, that typically applies to the lot, in the corner, or whatever. If we're talking about a row, right, Kendrick, would you
Yeah.
do something along those lines?
Yeah, we can do a license agreement, and it can always have, like, if you had 5 locations that they wanted to have approved at one time, then we could have a provision that would say if for some reason they weren't maintaining one of the 5, then the license could still exist for the 4, but the city could take measures to remove the one that they're not maintaining from the license agreement. So I think that would be, you have flexibility within that, and you can build in all the conditions that are required to that agreement.
Well, if we did one permit, they can, and they're installing 10, they can still pay a licensing fee for 10.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
just don't have to do the paperwork 10
Right,
times.
Right.
right.
That makes
Right.
sense.
Well, and
Rather
that's
than come
kinda what
before you
were
with 10
after, right?
applications
Right.
heard one night,
Yeah.
we take one application.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if you want us to bring in 50 different applications. This next application is the
No.
same thing. The next one is the same.
No, I think multiples on one,
Yeah.
but as long as that doesn't preclude us, like if someone comes in and wants to put 10 of these things in, and we think like 9 of them are good, but the
Exactly.
10th one is
Yeah,
no good.
you'd be able
Are
to
we
say
throwing the whole thing out,
So
or are we
preserve
just
that.
crossing out one out?
Just one.
Yeah, you could just,
Yeah.
And it's a per
I'm
unit.
fine with
fee,
that. That
not-
would be-
Not a per unit fee, not a per permit fee.
Right.
yes.
Yeah, if we're doing these one at a time, that's going to be onerous for everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah.
Well, let's go, actually,
Not
you
good.
raise a good point, Commissioner Andrade. What if, with the application fee itself, if it is 5 or less, we have a fee. If it goes to 10, the fee is increased by X number of dollars. And again, this also has to be based on the time involved for staff to
Sliding
process
scale,
it.
yeah, I
Right.
think that's
But-
kind of up to staff.
Yeah.
Sliding
But,
scale.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be
That's something else we'll
fine
look
with
at.
that.
And there's still an individual license, or whatever we're going to call it, lease or licensing fee per pole.
Yes.
Yeah.
If these were on private property, the city still gets a fee, correct?
On private
No.
property,
No.
No.
If the school puts it on their property, we have no right to
School would
charge?
get the lease rent.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can word it so that we can get a fee too?
I don't
A
think so. It
share?
would be like somebody renting their house and a city trying to get
Well,
something out
we
of
could
it.
lease the property to,
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I can't-
on the hospital, on the parking structure, we made a deal with them when they built the parking structure that we get to be able to put any cell installation the city wants to on the roof of that structure. So we would, if someone wanted to put an installation there, we'd make money off of that. But that, not on other ones that we haven't set that up ahead of time, yeah.
Is there any other ideas, thoughts, comments on this matter?
I guess one thing is if you don't allow them on LaSalle and Catella, then you're not going to get any fees.
Correct.
The city's not going to get any fees, so
Just was thinking the same thing.
Because that's, yeah.
do we want to do that or not? I don't know.
Let staff go back and take a look at zoning maps and some of the side streets that aren't residential. And let's see what we can come back with and show some opportunities with and without Catella and LoSal being included.
And if you bring back some information from other cities that have done this, I guess one of the things that might be nice to know is how many installations they have within their city. In other words, how many square miles is that particular city, and actually how many installations, how long have they been doing the program, for instance, and how many installations do they have in the city? They have 300, or they
Right.
have 10.
Is it
Do they have a
every
max?
8 poles or
Yeah.
every 20 poles?
And do they have a maximum amount that they allow?
Because if you find those cities, I wouldn't mind driving over there myself and just kind of driving through that city and just taking a look. At that point, they're going to be obvious because I'm looking for them, but I'll kind of be able to tell at least if it, something that just looks
I live in
atrocious.
Laguna,
Uh-huh.
and that's one of the ordinances I will be getting a
Okay.
copy of.
Mhm.
They are very stealth.
Are they?
Yeah. If you're ever in South County, I can give you a couple locations where they're located.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head where the equipment vault is. Like, might be underground because I can't even.
Right, right.
But I never paid attention to it. I saw when they were putting the antenna on a pole, so
Oh,
I
you
know
did,
the
okay.
antenna went up, but I've never really paid attention to where the equipment is, but now I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just another example of a neighboring city, although it's much larger, but Long Beach has thousands of them, so.
Thousands, okay.
I
Thousands.
know, I found it on my bike ride. I finally knew what I was looking at.
Well, I mean, and to your point, I've driven through Long Beach a lot. Never really noticed them. So,
I think that's the objective. That's what we want to, that's the one.
Right. And you have to wonder though, like even if, we're seeing that in that photo and it's pretty close up and in your face, but you have to wonder if you were driving, would that bother you, or would you just drive right by it and not even see
Right.
it?
Tom, do you know where that one's located?
I got that out of the Long Beach memo that I gave you guys.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw in Long Beach something similar to that one, that we have the picture of in here.
Yeah, they have all different kinds of them. Yeah. So it's huge.
Interesting.
It's going to be the.
Let me just ask our Assistant City Attorney, do you have enough information here to kind of put together a skeleton
Oh,
ordinance?
yeah, I think
Okay.
so, and then we can take all the other steps, bring back the information that we discussed
Okay.
as far as staff, and then get further feedback to develop something more detailed. Thank you.
Do you know off the top of your head if any of those other cities allow in residential or not?
I don't know off the top of my head, actually.
The ones that want to ask in this city, they're asking for 2 or 3 of them to be in residential areas. So I assume that other cities probably do have them in residential if they're asking.
It is quite, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud with that whole thing, but I know a lot of times that's where you have inefficiencies in cell service. I mean, there's certain parts of my house that I can't get cell service on some of our phones. So you have to wonder from a benefit standpoint to the community, if they are not that obtrusive, if they are more stealth, as you say, would there be a benefit to having them in residential, but somehow curtailing the amount, if you will, so it's not like every, I don't know. I think it's something to maybe think about. Because the other thing too is taking it off the major arterial ways, losing that potential income, but possibly being able to get it back in residential where it's not really as traveled as much. The residents, obviously, it's a concern if they are not for that. But if it's, I think it's something to probably take maybe a further look at.
My only concern is that it wouldn't be as pleasing to the eye in the residential, and we need to make sure we're getting the majority of the people happy. Los Al's 4 miles square, no matter how we look at it, and we're a small city. We have the ability to put these sprinkling throughout in, or not residential, but commercial areas, such that it would cover, believe it or not, the whole city. If we really looked at it, we can do it.
Depending on what the cover, I don't know what each one of those antennas covers.
But even then, for a small city like us, it wouldn't take that many to get great coverage, and we have no
Well,
hills. We're a
Right,
flat
but
city.
you have multiple carriers, and you can't put multiples on one pole, because we
Right.
don't want
Yeah,
that. So
right.
then you could end up where you're like, well, we got to put one over here and one over here and one over here because there's 5 different carriers that want to get coverage here. So it could end up being,
There could be, yeah.
right, you get full coverage and then you're like, oh yeah, but there's, 15 wireless carriers out there and they all want
And
full
at
coverage.
any given time, there could be 20 carriers down to 1. So, I mean, it gets
Right.
very challenging to please everybody.
And
Yeah.
realistically, Catella and Los Alamos Boulevard is where they're going to want to put them because, like in my neighborhood, if you put on Los Alamos Boulevard, we're only 4 streets. You'd cover the whole neighborhood. And same with if you did it down Catella, I mean, Carrier Row, I'm assuming the antenna would go all the way to the base.
Well, but
you
I
know?
think to Larry's point, in a lot of cases, they've already covered those major arterials with infrastructure that they already have. So where they have the gaps might be outside of those areas. So I don't know enough about it.
I'm all
to
about
really-
aesthetics. It's like huge to me. My comments in the beginning, it's very clear where I stand on that. I wouldn't want necessarily something where I live or where anybody else lives in this city for that matter that looks terrible. But let's be honest, in a perfect world, I would love to have underground cables right now, okay? When I look out my front yard right now, what I see are poles from 1960 that are, beat, and you've got wires running all different directions, cross members of wood and everything else. What if now they come in and they're mandated to put in a nicer looking pole and kind of clean all that up to a certain degree, and now there's a little antenna on there that you would never probably see anyway because there's so much other stuff going on those poles within the city anyway.
Sure.
So that's kind of where my thought process was on that.
No, I'm willing to look at anything. I just want to be very careful for the neighborhoods
I agree.
and that. No, I know you do.
100%.
Yeah, there's a lot to
So-
consider, because
Yeah.
to your point,
Well,
a lot of the existing infrastructure is not attractive
It's terrible.
infrastructure.
So
and
what,
this-
nice new hollow,
Right.
Right, it could look a lot better, yeah.
Could you replace the whole
That's
neighborhood's
a-
poles
well, that's what I'm
while you're at
saying.
it?
There's maybe a potential trade-off there that might be a silver lining.
They can do it, they just have to put underground utilities throughout the city.
Right? That'd be spectacular.
Vice Chair Riley, we've not closed the public hearing, which is actually good. Can we just ask it to be continued to the August 22nd Planning Commission meeting?
Yeah, does staff has direction, you guys are good on where to go with this whole thing? And, all right, great, so we'll,
Get a motion to continue?
did I close the public hearing, or?
No.
No, I left it open at your
It's good,
request.
yeah,
it's
Okay,
good.
so the
So
public
Our
hearing,
residents that don't want it in residential, they should come to the next meeting.
Good.
right, public hearing stays open, staff has direction, and we will continue this. Do we need to make a motion?
No, it's open and you're continuing the.
All right, so this item will be continued to our next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting,
August 22nd.
August 22nd. Very good. That brings us to item 10, which is items from the Community Development Services Director.
Kind of touched upon the zoning code update earlier in the meeting. We are coming to the end of our TAC meetings. We're at TAC meeting number 5 of 5 next on 13th. After that meeting, the consultants will be working on a draft zoning code update. We anticipate having a draft complete by November. We don't have the date set yet, but we'd like to have a study session with the Planning Commission separate from our regular meeting in November. And remember, the November meeting is going to be a special date. No, it's not. December is. November, we are going to be meeting regular because it does not fall Thanksgiving week. It's the week after Thanksgiving this year. So we may do a meeting the week before Thanksgiving. I'll talk to the commission, see about a time that works with everybody. But we'd like to have a study session with that draft and walk the commission through the draft in a study session before we get to public hearing on the adoption of or on the recommendation to adopt the zoning code update. Also want to mention that staff has received a application for a 3-unit commercial development on the southwest corner of Winters Circle and Catella. It was that old bank building. That will be coming,
Chase.
right, that'll be coming before the planning commission at your next meeting in August. The only identified tenant at this point is Starbucks, and they're proposing to have a drive-through Starbucks as part of that application. So you'll be seeing that next month. With that, Tom, anything else to add?
I think that's it. Have we talked to them about it? Mentioned the apartment project up the street, have we?
The 107 unit? Or
Yeah, 107 units.
Yeah, I'll give a real brief summary. We've received an application for 107 at 3342 Cerritos.
Right. exactly, which is Monty
3342,
Collins'
that's,
old
yeah, the
site.
Monty Collins property, Cerritos, near Chestnut. There are a couple issues that we are still trying to work with the applicant on. Their density, they're proposing to utilize right-of-way areas, which was once part of theirs, as total land area to calculate their densities. Our general plan does not allow that. So we are still talking with them about that. We believe that 107 will probably drop pursuant to our general plan. They also had some minor parking issues that I think we've resolved. We've not seen revised plans that address the parking issue, but there's also some issues with the size of parking stall dimensions. But we're in the process of working on the environmental impact study for that, and that should be coming to the Planning Commission probably somewhere in the next 2 to 3 months.
The address for that's off Cerritos, so is that coming from the main, where their actual office was, and then back in?
Mhm.
I thought,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
That's what confuses me. Do we have to keep that type of address
No.
on it? No,
We
okay.
don't have to.
On that, when you do the environmental impact, can you make sure that the traffic commissioner identifies all the relevant intersections? I think on that last development, they considered intersections down here on Catella, failing to address the 4 or 5 that were most or closest to the development. So I would like all the intersections to be considered in this next traffic impact.
All right.
And are we doing anything about getting people to, the businesses to start working on their,
Yeah,
Yes.
the coffee shop down the street has pulled some of their weeds. That's still a work in progress. So they have done some. It does look a little bit better, but they still have a little bit of work to do. There were several other property maintenance issues on that site. They had a trash enclosure that was deteriorating, and they fixed that up. So they're working with code enforcement slowly, but working.
we need to get a lot of the businesses to, right near where the City National Bank was, they're just dead grass. I mean, the one just east of it.
Where the new doctor's offices
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, things like that. We need to get them to want to do something to help beautify the city. Be
Yeah.
more encouraged. We're trying, like them, to try all businesses.
Right.
And then are we going to be working on codes, or looking at the window displays or what we allow for? I know we talked about it, but, or you mentioned it, bringing back what we allow for coverage on a window?
That will be something that's up for discussion at our TAC meeting number 3.
Okay.
We talked about signage, and there was not a whole lot of direction for any change. But the commission feels that something needs to be modified or updated. Commission, can make that recommendation to the city council.
Or enforced, like that one on Catella and Bloomfield, where the whole upper window,
Second story.
every window is covered.
Code enforcement is working on that
Yeah.
one as well. I know which one you're talking about, yeah. Also, one other thing I forgot to mention, at the city council meeting on the 20th, the city council is going to be conducting a public hearing to consider the parking changes that the planning commission recommended to them last month. So those will be coming to the city council.
And then I had some comments, so maybe the traffic commission could relook at Farquhar and how they changed the entry into,
It is going to be restriped probably in the next week or two. Do we have a date yet?
I remember the place.
Yep. It's going to go back to the way it was before.
But the restaurant, I can't remember.
Yep.
Jack in the
Mama's?
Box, there it was.
Oh. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
right.
because people said they were breaking the law trying to get in,
Yeah.
and I didn't pay much attention because I'm a one-way person. I'd go this way to the ponds.
So that,
Goodness.
the city council meeting, I wasn't at the last 2 commission meetings, so the parking standards, we said.
Not the parking standards. There was some changes to location, the dimensions,
Oh, got it.
but not affecting the numbers of parking spaces, no.
Yeah.
That was already done.
Yeah.
That's done.
Council already approved that earlier this year, and then this was the remaining
Right.
issues that we discussed.
Okay.
Was it the parking, was it the traffic commission that is going to now restripe that? Is that come before the traffic commission?
It
They
did.
they decided to restripe it? They got a lot of feedback from the public? Is that where it came
There was
from?
a lot of feedback from the public. We went to the planning, traffic commission last month, and June?
No, June.
In June, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, in May.
In May? It was in May, yeah. In May, and the commission said, change it back to the way it was.
Interesting.
Maybe they could also give feedback on the apartments coming too, regarding traffic too, so they should be engaged in that.
All right, I think we've kind of overlapped into commissioner reports there a little bit too. So is there, so we're done with items from the community development director. Anything else, commissioner reports? Anything anyone wants to bring up? No? All right, meeting adjourned.